The laughter started behind me. Not loud at first. Just a few whispers. A couple of quiet chuckles. But in a silent ballroom, even whispers can feel like a spotlight. I kept walking, step by step, across the marble floor of the Grand Riverside Hotel. Crystal chandeliers glowed above me. Soft violin music floated through the air. Every table was covered in white silk. It was a beautiful wedding. Perfect, really. Except for one thing. Me. I could feel the eyes. Judging. Scanning. Wondering why someone like me was even there. And then I heard it. A voice behind me. Not quiet enough. Did he get lost? More laughter. Another voice joined in. Maybe he's the caterer. The group at the champagne table burst into giggles. I stopped walking for half a second. Not because I was hurt. Because I had heard this kind of thing before. Many times. I adjusted my jacket. Simple black suit. Nothing flashy. No designer label. No shiny watch. Just clean. Plain. Easy to underestimate. Exactly the way I preferred. I continued toward the back of the ballroom. The wedding guests filled the room with luxury. Expensive dresses. Tailored suits. Gold bracelets. Diamond earrings. Everyone looked like they belonged in a magazine. Everyone except me. At least, that's what they thought. I found my seat. Table 17. The very last table in the room. Near the kitchen doors. Funny thing is, I had chosen that seat myself. Across the room, the bride stood near the stage. Emily. She looked radiant. White dress. Soft curls in her hair. A smile that could light up the entire room. I was happy for her. Truly. But happiness doesn't erase history. Not completely. A tall man stepped beside her. The groom. Daniel. Perfect hair. Perfect suit. Perfect confidence. He raised his champagne glass. The guests applauded. I noticed something interesting. When Daniel scanned the room, his eyes passed over me like I was invisible. Not even a second glance. That was okay. In fact, that was exactly how the night needed to start. Is this seat taken? I looked up. A woman stood beside the chair across from me. Mid-40s maybe. Elegant navy dress. Sharp eyes. Observant eyes. No, I said calmly. She sat down. For a moment she studied the room. Then she glanced at me. You don't seem very impressed. I smiled slightly. It's a nice wedding. That's not what I asked. I chuckled softly. She was perceptive. I'm just enjoying the view, I replied. She nodded slowly, like she knew there was more to the story. At the next table over, the same group from earlier kept glancing at me. One man leaned toward his friends, not bothering to whisper this time. Look at this guy's suit. Another man smirked. Maybe the valet parked his own car and decided to stay. More laughter. The woman across from me heard everything. Her eyebrow lifted. You know them? She asked quietly. No. You seem very calm. I shrugged. I've had worse dinners. She let out a quiet laugh. But she kept watching me. Not judging. Observing. Trying to understand. The waiter arrived with champagne. Crystal glasses clinked around the room. The celebration officially began. A huge screen lowered from a ceiling near the stage. Wedding photos appeared. Emily and Daniel smiling on beaches. Walking through vineyards. Laughing under sunsets. The guests sighed happily. I watched quietly. Not the photos. The reactions. Daniel's father stood near the front. Proud. Commanding. The type of man used to being the center of attention. His name was Robert. A businessman. A very loud one. He raised his glass and walked onto the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, he announced. The room quieted. Tonight we celebrate love. Applause. He continued. But we also celebrate success. He gestured around the ballroom. This wedding represents the beginning of a powerful family legacy. More applause. Robert loved speeches, especially speeches about himself. He glanced around the room proudly. Then his eyes briefly landed on me. Just for a moment, his expression tightened, like he was trying to remember something unpleasant. But then he looked away. The woman across from me leaned closer. You know the groom's father? We've met. Recently? Not exactly. She studied my face again. You're not just a guest here, are you? I took a sip of champagne. It depends how you define guest. She smiled slowly. I thought so. Dinner was served. 5 courses. Perfect presentation. Perfect service. Every detail flawless. After all, the bill for tonight was just under $400,000. Most people in the room thought Robert paid for it. Others believed Daniel covered part of it. A few assumed Emily's family helped. No one asked the hotel staff. And no one asked the accounting department. Because if they had, they would have seen one name. One signature. Mine. Across the room, Daniel stood with his friends, laughing loudly. One of them pointed toward my table. Daniel looked over. His smile faded slightly. Then he leaned toward his group and said something. They all turned, looking directly at me. One of them laughed. Another shook his head. I couldn't hear the words, but I knew the tone. The woman across from me noticed. What did he say? Probably wondering how I got past security. You are very patient. I'm very curious, I said. About what? How long it takes for people to realize their assumptions are wrong. She smiled again, this time impressed. Halfway through dinner, a man in a hotel manager's suit walked into the ballroom. He scanned the room carefully, looking for someone. His eyes landed on me. For a split second his face lit up with recognition. But then he quickly looked away. Professional. Discreet. He turned toward the stage instead. The woman across from me noticed that too. Interesting, she whispered. What is? The hotel manager just looked at you like you sign his paychecks. I didn't answer. I simply kept eating. The jokes continued through the evening. Small comments. Side glances. Underestimating smiles. At one point a man walked past my table and said loudly to his friend, Careful, that table might be the staff break area. More laughter. I remained calm. The woman across from me finally asked, Does this bother you? I thought about it. Then I shook my head. No. Why not? Because the night isn't over yet. She leaned back in her chair, smiling like someone who had just started watching a very interesting movie. Soon it was time for speeches. Daniel grabbed the microphone. He told stories, jokes, college memories. Everyone laughed. Then he said something that made the room roar. And let's be honest, Daniel said with a grin. This wedding cost so much I might have to sell a kidney. The crowd laughed. Robert stood proudly beside him, soaking in the applause. I noticed the hotel manager again, standing near the wall, looking slightly uncomfortable. The woman across from me leaned in again. I have a feeling something very unusual is about to happen tonight. I placed my napkin on the table. Maybe. Should I be nervous? No, I said softly. You should stay. Because in less than 20 minutes, the entire room was going to learn something. Something very simple. Something written clearly, on a legal contract. A payment authorization. And a name. A name no one in that ballroom expected to see. Mine. The music softened. Dinner plates were cleared. The ballroom lights dimmed slightly as the evening moved into the next phase of celebration. Laughter filled the room. Wine glasses clinked. People leaned into their chairs, comfortable now. Confident. Certain they understood everything about the room around them. Except they didn't. Not even close. I sat quietly at table 17. The same seat near the kitchen doors. Still invisible to most people. But not to the woman across from me. She folded her hands and looked directly at me. You're waiting for something, she said. Her voice wasn't accusing, just curious. I smiled gently. Everyone here is waiting for something. She shook her head. No, everyone here is celebrating. Her eyes narrowed slightly. You're observing. I took a slow sip of water. Observation can be very educational. She leaned back again, studying me like a puzzle. Can I ask you something? You already are. Fair point. She paused, then spoke quietly. Why are you sitting at the last table of a wedding that clearly cost a fortune? That's where my name was placed. Did you request it? Yes. Her eyes widened a little. That's unusual. Not really. I gestured toward the room. From back here you can see everything. The stage, the guests, the reactions, the truth. Across the ballroom, Daniel was greeting guests. His smile looked practiced now. A little tired, a little forced, but still confident. His friends surrounded him. One of them pointed toward our table again. Daniel glanced over. This time our eyes met. Just for a second. Recognition flickered across his face. Then confusion. Then something else. Dismissal. He turned away. The woman across from me noticed. You know him better than you're saying. We've crossed paths. When? A few months ago. Business. Something like that. The DJ announced the next part of the evening. Toasts. Applause filled the ballroom. The first speaker was one of Daniel's college friends. A tall man with a loud voice and a bigger ego. He grabbed the microphone and grinned. All right, everyone, he said. Let me tell you about the time Daniel almost got kicked out of school. The crowd laughed immediately. The stories rolled on. Embarrassing moments. Wild nights. Bad decisions. Typical wedding toast material. But halfway through his speech, the man glanced toward my table. He squinted, then laughed. Oh man, I almost forgot. The room quieted slightly. He pointed casually toward me. Daniel, who's the guy at the back table? A few heads turned, then more. Suddenly half the room was looking at me. Daniel chuckled awkwardly. Probably someone from a hotel. Laughter spread through the crowd. The speaker leaned into the microphone. Well, if he's hotel staff, he's got guts sitting down during the party. The ballroom erupted. The woman across from me looked furious. Her jaw tightened. But I stayed calm. Completely calm. I simply folded my hands on the table and waited. When the laughter faded, the speaker continued his toast. But the damage was done. The room had chosen its target for the evening. Me. Guests began whispering again. Some openly staring. Others smiling in that polite but dismissive way people do when they think someone doesn't belong. The woman across from me leaned closer. I'm starting to get angry on your behalf. That's not necessary. It's disrespectful. It's predictable. She stared at me. You really knew this would happen. I suspected it might. And you still came. Yes. Why? I looked around the ballroom. The chandeliers. The flowers. The massive stage. The screen hanging from the ceiling. Because tonight wasn't about revenge. It was about truth. And truth has perfect timing. Another toast began. This time from Daniel's father, Robert. He walked onto the stage with the confidence of a man used to applause. The room quieted immediately. He tapped the microphone. Family and friends, he began. Tonight is a very special night. He smiled proudly at Daniel and Emily. My son has always aimed high in life. He paused for dramatic effect. And tonight we celebrate not just love, but success. The crowd clapped again. Robert loved that word. Success. He gestured around the room. This wedding represents years of hard work, sacrifice, and financial commitment. The guests nodded approvingly. Robert continued proudly. I made sure my son had the wedding he deserved. More applause. I noticed the hotel manager again, standing near the wall. His expression tightened slightly. He glanced at me, then quickly looked away. The woman across from me saw it too. That man keeps checking on you, she whispered. Yes. Why? You'll see. Robert kept talking, bragging. Story after story about building his business empire, about making smart deals, about knowing how to read people. Success, he said loudly, comes from recognizing value. The irony almost made me smile. He raised his glass. And tonight we celebrate the value of family. The guests cheered. Robert stepped down from the stage, proud, satisfied, completely unaware. A few minutes later, the hotel manager quietly approached our table. He stopped beside me. Professional posture. Careful tone. Sir, he said softly. Yes, we're ready whenever you are. The woman across from me froze. Her eyes widened. Ready for what? She whispered. I looked at the manager. 5 minutes. Yes, sir. He nodded and walked away. The woman leaned forward immediately. Okay, she said. That was not normal. I chuckled. No, it wasn't. You just told the hotel manager what to do. Not exactly. Then what exactly is happening tonight? I thought about how to answer. Then I asked her a question instead. Do you trust your instincts? She blinked. What? Your instincts? The ones telling you something is wrong here. She nodded slowly. Yes. Good. Why? Because in about 5 minutes, they're going to be proven right. The DJ returned to the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, he announced, we have a special surprise presentation for the couple. Guests murmured excitedly. The lights dimmed further. The giant projector screen lowered completely. Soft music began playing. Photos appeared. But these weren't wedding photos. They were documents, invoices, contracts. The room murmured in confusion. Robert frowned. What is this? The hotel manager stepped onto the stage, holding a microphone. His voice was calm, professional. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Robert stood up immediately. This isn't part of the program. The manager nodded politely. Actually, sir, it is. Guests looked around in confusion. Daniel stepped forward. What's going on? The manager continued. Before tonight's event began, the individual responsible for funding this entire wedding requested that a short presentation be shown. The ballroom went completely silent. Robert laughed dismissively. That's ridiculous. He pointed at himself. Everyone knows I paid for this wedding. The manager paused, then spoke carefully. I'm afraid that information is incorrect. Whispers spread across the room. Robert's smile faded. What are you talking about? The manager gestured toward the screen. A contract appeared. Clear. Official. Highlighted. The title read, Full Event Payment Authorization. $400,000. Paid in full. Robert scoffed. This is absurd. He turned toward the audience. I handled the finances personally. The manager nodded again. Yes, sir. However, the payment was processed through a private account. Robert crossed his arms. Whose account? The manager looked toward the back of the room, directly at me. The woman beside me slowly turned her head. Her eyes widened. Oh, she whispered. Oh my God. The manager raised the microphone again. And according to our records, the individual who paid for tonight's entire wedding is seated at table 17. Every single person in the ballroom turned around. All at once, hundreds of eyes, staring directly at me. The same man they had laughed at. The same man they thought was the caterer, the valet, the staff member. The joke. I calmly pushed my chair back and stood up. For a moment, no one moved. The ballroom was completely silent. Hundreds of guests stood frozen, all facing the same direction. Me, table 17. The last table in the room, near the kitchen doors, the same place they had laughed at all evening. I slowly adjusted my jacket and stepped away from the chair. Every footstep across the marble floor echoed in the silence. No violin music now. No laughter. Just the quiet sound of shoes on polished stone. I walked toward the stage. Calm, unhurried. The hotel manager stepped aside respectfully as I approached. Robert's face had lost all color. Daniel looked confused. Emily looked nervous. And the guests, they looked like people realizing they had misunderstood something very important. I reached the stage. The manager handed me the microphone. I nodded in thanks. Then I turned to face the room. All those expensive suits. All those sparkling dresses. All those people who had decided exactly who I was before ever speaking to me. I took a slow breath and spoke calmly. Good evening. My voice echoed softly through the ballroom speakers. No anger, no shouting, just quiet confidence. I know this is unexpected. Nervous murmurs moved through the crowd. I glanced toward Robert. His arms were still crossed, defensive, confused. Then I looked at Daniel. He was trying to piece things together, trying to understand how someone he had ignored all evening was suddenly standing on stage. I want to start by saying something very simple. I continued. I'm genuinely happy for the couple tonight. Emily looked surprised. Daniel shifted uncomfortably. This wedding is beautiful, I said. The venue is stunning. The food was excellent. A few awkward chuckles slipped through the room, but I'd like to explain why I'm here. I paused, let the silence breathe. Then I continued. About 6 months ago, I had a business meeting with Daniel. Daniel's eyes widened slightly. Recognition finally reached him. Yes, I said softly. You remember. The room looked back and forth between us. We met to discuss a small startup investment, I explained. Daniel had an idea for a company. He was confident. Ambitious. I respect that. Daniel nodded slowly, still uncertain where this was going. But during that meeting, I paused again. Something interesting happened. The ballroom leaned closer. Daniel didn't know who I was. Light laughter from a few guests. Daniel forced a smile. And that's completely fine, I said calmly. Most people don't. But instead of asking questions, instead of learning who he was speaking with, Daniel looked down slightly. He made assumptions. The room grew quieter. He looked at my simple suit, my old car, my quiet attitude, and he decided I wasn't worth his time. Daniel's friends shifted uncomfortably in their seats. I continued gently. He ended the meeting after 10 minutes. Robert interrupted suddenly. What does this have to do with my son's wedding? His voice was sharp, impatient. I turned toward him. Actually, sir, it has everything to do with it. I walked a few steps across the stage, still calm, still composed. The truth is, after that meeting, I never expected to see Daniel again. But a few months later, I received a wedding invitation. Daniel looked confused. I didn't send you an invitation. That's correct, I said. Emily did. The bride gasped softly. Yes, I said gently. We met once at a charity event. Emily nodded slowly. I remember. You mentioned the wedding. And you mentioned something else. The room waited. You mentioned that the wedding was becoming very expensive. Emily's eyes dropped. Robert shifted angrily. I continued. You were worried about the pressure it was putting on both families. Emily looked embarrassed, but you said something else too. You said you just wanted a beautiful day with the people you loved. Her eyes filled with emotion. I remembered that. I turned back to the audience. So I made a decision. I contacted the hotel. I contacted the event planner. And I asked a very simple question. I gestured toward the ballroom. How much would it cost to make this wedding perfect? Gasps rippled across the room. I was given a number. $400,000. And I paid it. Silence. Heavy silence. Robert stepped forward angrily. That's impossible. The invoices came to me. I nodded calmly. Yes, they were addressed to you. Robert blinked. What? The hotel followed my request. The invoices were sent to you, but the payment came from my account. The hotel manager stepped forward. That is correct, sir. Robert looked like the ground had disappeared beneath him. Daniel stared at me. But why? His voice was quieter now. Honest. I answered simply. Because sometimes people deserve kindness, even when they don't expect it. I looked around the room again, and sometimes people deserve a reminder that appearances can be misleading. A few guests lowered their eyes, thinking about the jokes, the whispers, the laughter. I continued calmly. Tonight I sat at the back table. I heard the comments, the jokes, the assumptions. I paused, but none of it made me angry. The woman from my table was watching with a proud smile. It made me curious. Curious how quickly people decide someone's worth. I turned back to Daniel. You're talented, I said honestly. You're ambitious. But there's one thing every successful person must learn. Daniel listened carefully. Never judge someone's value by what they wear or where they sit. The room was completely still. I placed the microphone gently on the stand. This wedding was never about proving a point. It was about giving two people a beautiful day. I looked at Emily, and I hope it still is. Emily wiped a tear from her cheek. Thank you, she whispered. Robert didn't speak. For the first time all evening, he had nothing to say. Daniel walked toward the stage slowly. His friends watched nervously. When he reached me, he held out his hand. I owe you an apology. I shook his hand calmly. Apologies are easy. He nodded. Lessons are harder. Exactly. The DJ slowly turned the music back on. Soft piano notes filled the room again. The tension faded. Guests began talking quietly, but the mood had changed. Completely. People who had laughed earlier now looked thoughtful. Some embarrassed. Some inspired. The woman from table 17 approached the stage. She smiled at me. I knew something was different about you. I chuckled. You trusted your instincts. She nodded. Where did you learn that kind of patience? I thought about it for a moment. Then I answered. Life. Later that evening, the dancing resumed. The celebration continued. But something had shifted in the room. People spoke a little more kindly, listened a little more carefully, and looked at others a little more thoughtfully. As for me, I slipped out quietly before the night ended. No spotlight, no applause, just the cool evening air outside the hotel. I stood for a moment under the city lights, thinking about how strange people can be, how quickly we measure others, how easily we underestimate someone sitting quietly in the corner. But sometimes, the quiet person in the corner is the one holding the entire room together. If this story resonated with you, let me know where you're watching from. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this.